The circumstances of my life were amazing, and almost everything that I believed about happiness was wrong. Hi, I'm Dr. Jodi Richardson, and this is Well, Hello Anxiety. In a world that often moves too fast, we're here to pause, breathe, and understand anxiety together. Each episode will explore practical strategies, share honest conversations, and uncover the science behind anxiety and wellbeing, all while creating a space where it's okay to not be okay. Let's continue this journey together. Hello and welcome back to another episode. It is always such a joy to have your company, and today's a really special episode, and I'll tell you why. For those of you that have been listening to the podcast for some time, you'll know my story. You'll know that I've had anxiety since I was a little girl, but it wasn't diagnosed until my mid-20s. And really the only reason I went to the GP to get help for my mental health was because I was struggling with what was ultimately diagnosed as depression. And one of the things that I realised when I was coming through the other side of that was that almost everything that I believed about happiness was wrong. And this is because the circumstances of my life were amazing. Like if there were kind of a checklist of things that you'd want to tick off in your mid-20s, I felt like I was, killing it. I had a really great job, beautiful friends. I was still playing netball that I loved. Peter, who is now my husband, we were dating, and I even had what I thought would really make me happy, which was a shiny red sports car, because I had all of a sudden a professional full-time job and a disposable income. I was still living at home. But when I became depressed, the sense of hopelessness and the sadness, it's indescribable. And if you've been there, you'll understand. And I couldn't have been further from happiness. And I realised that was really, I think, essentially what sent me to the GP, because I'm like, how can I have all of these things going on for me and just feel so miserable and so hopeless? And so I wanted to understand it more. And part of what I did when I was healing was like, okay, if all the things I thought contributed don't, what is it that makes a difference? And I ended up studying the science of happiness many years ago, and things began to shift for me. The knowledge that I learned genuinely changed my life. And it's why I wanted to talk to Declan Edwards today, because this is the work that he does all the time. This is what he has dedicated his life to, understanding happiness and helping people bring more happiness into their lives through the application of skills, which is really exciting. He is a coach. He is an author, the author of the book, How to Be Happy, Stop Chasing Happiness and Learn the 5 Skills to Create It Instead. He is the founder of the BU Happiness College, and he has spent well over a decade dismantling myths, understanding happiness, traveling the world asking people what actually happiness means to them. And he is joining us today to really help us understand more about happiness, what we get wrong, and what we can do to actually create a happier life for ourselves and our families. So you've been so patient, Declan, but a huge and very warm welcome to you, and thank you for the work that you're doing, because we all want to be happier. There's no question about that, is there?
No, not at all. I'm quite fortunate to have dedicated my life and career to something that I'm yet to meet a human being who says they don't care about it. I'm yet to meet someone who goes, happiness, no, not for me. I don't want any of that, thank you. But thank you so much for having me. Listening to your story, I found myself nodding along quite a bit, going, oh, yes, this was my teenage years and early 20s too. And I think that's how I ended up studying the science and skills of happiness, was because fundamentally I was also making a lot of mistakes about happiness and pursuing what I thought would bring me happiness, and it just inherently wasn't. So I can relate a lot to that, and I'm sure many of the listeners can as well.
Oh, look, absolutely. And what we're going to talk about today, and what you're going to learn as a listener today, is going to change your life. And I don't say that lightly, and it's because what we do believe about happiness and what we think will contribute costs a lot of money, wastes a lot of time, and can have us kind of like questioning where we've gone wrong. I think a really good place to start is like, why do so many people get happiness wrong? And what are some of the misconceptions that you can help kind of myth bust for us?
Yeah, I think the reason so many people get happiness wrong is because we've fundamentally been sold and taught the wrong map for happiness. And the first way that I normally teach that and share that with people is we're told from a very young age and sold this idea that happiness is a future-focused outcome that comes after we achieve something, right? We see it in the saying, the best way to know if you're doing this, by the way, is how you answer the statement or complete the sentence, I'll be happy when. And let me tell you, throughout my life, I've put a lot of things at the end of that sentence, right?
Yeah.
I'll be happy when I'm in a relationship, when I get out of the relationship, when I travel, when I have a holiday, when I make more money. Like, we're consistently putting happiness as like, I'll magically feel happy when I get to this stage. And what I'm sure a lot of people have experienced is as we get closer to that benchmark, we put in the work, we put in the years, you get the job, you work your way up the career ladder, you tick all the boxes, as you were saying,
Yeah.
in your intro about your life. We tick the boxes of what we were told would bring us happiness. And we get there and either go, oh, I do feel happy for a split second and for a moment. Maybe I celebrate it for a day or two and then I set the next goal. Or as I get closer to it, I go, is this it? This is what I've put all this work into? Like, I don't feel happy and fulfilled and thriving. And so we go, oh, well, obviously I need to raise the bar again. And so we're continuously chasing. And so much of what I've loved about studying happiness as a science and skill set for the last decade of my life and teaching it to people is there's all this research that now shows if we reverse that equation, if we go instead of success first, happiness will follow, some really cool things happen if we focus on actually cultivate happiness first as a skill set and cultivate our well-being now. And ironically, success in a lot of areas tends to follow. Like, we find that people who are happy and well, they tend to have more fulfilling relationships and marriages. They tend to perform better at work. They tend to be more likely to get promotions and pay rises. Their health is better. Like, all these things we care about as a society may actually be the byproduct of happiness and well-being. And that's where we should be starting. But a lot of people don't do that. And I think the other main mistake, if I'll sort of highlight a top two or misconception about happiness, is we unnecessarily give ourselves a very narrow range of happy feelings. Now, when I talk about happiness, I don't think it means you need to only feel happy all the time. I'm not about toxic positivity, right? I think every emotion has its purpose. I know, tell me about it. There's enough of that in the world of self-help. We don't need more. Every emotion has its purpose. But I've come to believe that if we expand our range of happiness, and what I mean by that, if I was to ask someone, hey, what is happiness? What does it feel like? Describe it to me as if I'm a child. What I've found really interesting over my years of kind of traveling the world asking people this question is if we look at countries that are more individualistic, more capitalistic, so countries like Australia, New Zealand, UK, US, Canada, people tend to lean more into expressions of happiness that are quite fleeting. They come quick and go quick. So things like joy, excitement, pleasure, accomplishment, like these are beautiful feelings. I'm not saying that they don't matter, but they are quite fleeting. Whereas more collectivist cultures tend to lean more into happiness feels like contentment. It feels like peace. It feels like connection. It feels like meaning. And so there's different expressions of happiness. And I don't think one is inherently better than the other. But I know for a fact that if your expression of happiness, if you think happiness is joy, for example, there are going to be chapters of life, maybe days, weeks, maybe even months, where joy is just not accessible, where it's just not going to be part of your life. And if that's our only approach to happiness is cultivating and experiencing joy, we're going to feel remarkably unhappy during those chapters. But if I also went, hang on, happiness also feels like connection. Well, I know that in some chapters where you wouldn't think happiness would exist, chapters like grief and loss of a loved one, I've not felt joy during loss of a loved one or grief. In fact, it's been remarkably absent, but I have felt deep connection. I've felt deep love. I've felt deep, even gratitude for them and appreciation for the life that I got to live with this person since they, before they passed away. And so I think if we unnecessarily go, okay, happiness is just those fleeting, nice feelings, the yellow smiley face ones, we miss out on a lot of happiness that can coexist with difficult times. If nothing else, if people are listening to this conversation and, obviously listen to the whole conversation because I'm sure we're going to cover great things. But if you were to stop here and just go, okay, maybe I don't gamble my happiness on it being an outcome of success. I cultivate it now as a skill. And maybe I don't narrow my happiness to just mean joy or excitement or pleasure. I also look at these other range of feelings that would sit under the happiness umbrella term. You're already setting yourself up for a much higher likelihood of a happy life.
Oh, look, honestly, you're exactly right. Of course you are. Of course you are. But they're such important places to begin. And it's quite liberating, I think, because some of the goals and things that we hinge our happiness on can be quite in the distance and in the future and require a lot of work and time. And we don't have to wait for that. We can find more happiness today and tomorrow it's unlikely that anybody listening hasn't got a challenge in their life right now. And here in Australia, we know we've just had a new budget that's been released. There is financial pressures, pressures on renters. There are stresses in families. There are redundancies and anxious kids and mental health challenges and grief and loss and change. And all of that is actually what makes us human. And those ups and downs are inevitable for all of us. And like you said, that we don't have to wait for those to be behind us. We can't. That's not human. That we can find more happiness in even in the midst of really difficult challenges. And when you were speaking about the different experiences of happiness, it reminds me of the section of your book where you've written about you shared the feelings, the emotions wheel, which incidentally, I used to have a cushion with that printed on it in the hope of like building that vocabulary with my kids, but everyone just sat on it. Then the dog stood on it and it got grubby and I got rid of it. But the nuanced language and that emotional, that I'm going to say that emotional literacy, am I using the right expression?
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. We cannot underestimate how important that is for our happiness, can we? And you've touched on that. And in terms of language, the other thing that you mentioned that I'm really interested in you unpacking for us is happiness and well-being. They can be used interchangeably, and we know that you can interchange the science of happiness for the science of well-being. So for listeners who have listened to the podcast, I've talked about well-being a lot. We talk about mental health a lot. Can you help listeners kind of understand happiness and well-being, and are they interchangeable? What do they mean? Do they mean the same thing? And also, why is the language that we use when it comes to how we feel so important?
So yeah, to start with, this is, to be honest, one of the banes of my existence as a happiness researcher, because happiness researchers have a remarkably good ability to argue about how we define happiness. And we've been doing this for decades. And this is one of the questions that repeatedly comes up is like, when you look at the academic studies and literature, the amount of times we swap out happiness for well-being or wellness, or like there's these different terminologies, and we go, well, what does this all mean? How does it look like? Where I've landed, and I'm not naive or bold enough to say that my way that I've landed on is the right way out of every happiness researcher and, happiness professional in the world or wellbeing scientist. Where I've landed is I look at something called the wellbeing spectrum, which is divided into 5 stages. At the very lowest end of the spectrum, we have crisis point. So this is where someone's functionality is severely limited. They're going through a period of immense mental health challenge to the point where it impacts their ability to function well in a relationship, to show up to work, to live a day-to-day life. Yeah. Then as we go up from crisis point, we go into the zone of struggling. From there, we go into the zone of surviving, which is like we're getting by, we're ticking the boxes. And I think a lot of people spend a lot of time here without realizing it and go, I've kind of got my way through the week and month, but what do I have to show for it in terms of how I feel at the end? Like another year's just passed me by. I don't feel bad. The amount of people I talk to who are like, I don't feel like my mental health is a crisis point to work with a professional. And I'm like, do you want to wait till it is? Like that would be like saying, I'm not going to exercise until my doctor says I've had a heart attack. Like what an odd approach to take. But I think inherently that's, we're getting better as a society with our approach to mental health and well-being, but a lot of it tends to be reactive still, right? How do we help people go from in the spectrum, the wellness spectrum, from a zone of crisis to a zone of surviving? And then that's the tick. Congratulations, we've done it. Someone's functional. They're back at work. They're feeling okay. And I like to be a little bit naively hopeful and optimistic and go, well, maybe we can aim for more than okay. And that's where the other side of this spectrum comes in, which is the 4th stage is to be in a zone of growing and where we're learning new skills, we're expanding. And then the 5th stage is, depending on where you read it, either flourishing or thriving, right? So fulfilling our potential, feeling our best. I promise you, and I promise everyone listening to this, you will not, regardless of how much time you spend studying and practicing the skills and science of happiness, you will not spend your entire life in the zone of growing or in the zone of thriving and flourishing. Even as a happiness researcher, as a happiness coach, a happiness expert, I have my moments where I'll be in suffering or struggling. I'll have my moments where I'm in surviving. I even have crisis moments, right? The goal is, and this is where I think happiness blends with this well-being spectrum. From my perspective, a happy life is when we have the tools, the capabilities, the support networks, everything that we need to spend more time on the higher end of that spectrum and to healthily and effectively navigate when we do end up on the lower ends of that spectrum, because it's going to happen, right? Life will throw curveballs.
Yeah.
And sometimes I put it as the goal of happiness and of the work that I do is to help people learn how to navigate through the tough times of life when they're in the lower ends of the wellbeing spectrum, and marinate when they're in the good ends of the spectrum, when they're in the higher ends and life is going well and they feel well. How do we lengthen that and savor it and strengthen it? Because a lot of people's brains, mine included, have a very funny tendency to do the exact opposite.
Yes.
You know, they navigate so quickly through the good moments. Something good happens and our brain just skips straight past it. But when we're in the lower ends, when we're in that zone of struggling or surviving or crisis, our mind really likes to marinate in it and stew in it and stay there. And it does that for good reason. You know, our brain cares about our survival, not so much our happiness. But thankfully, we can train it and rewire it and try to have some tools and skills that we can practice that stack the deck a little bit in our favor.
Oh, gosh. Thank you for such a comprehensive answer to that question and for really normalizing the fact that, I mean, it is not normal to be happy all the time. It is not normal. We are human. We love, like, I'm such a dog lover. And, you know, we've lost pets along the way. People have lost connections, family, friends. When we love and care and find the things that bring us joy and meaning and connection and gratitude, inevitably, sometimes we lose those experiences or those opportunities. It's natural to have feelings and emotions around that are not considered to be the ones we like, the emotions that we enjoy and the emotions that we need to savor more. We all have, and we know that there's more coming for us if we lose people in our lives or pets or opportunities or things go wrong, as they inevitably do. So could you please speak to the idea of normalizing all emotions and also the research around when we can notice and name what we are experiencing, how it can have a positive effect on our psychological health?
Yeah, definitely. Because it is such an important skill. It's one of the first ones I cover in the book, as you'd know. I think a lot of people are familiar with the skill, the happiness skill or soft skill, some people call it, of emotional intelligence. It's been very well researched and spoken about for a good 30, 40 years. But in the book, I kind of take a couple of steps back from that and go, well, we can't hope to be intelligent about something if we can't recognize it and name it.
Yeah.
Having emotional awareness and emotional literacy are the first steps to emotional intelligence. And I think they're steps that often are overlooked or undervalued. People try to skip past them. And then not just the awareness and literacy, which is to be able to name our emotions, but emotional acceptance and emotional curiosity to go, hey, this emotion can be here. It deserves to be here. It's trying to tell me something. There's a saying that I love to use for myself and at the happiness college that I run of, if we hope to live a fulfilled life, we must expect that we'll experience the full range of human emotions.
Yeah.
A fulfilling life means we will experience all of it. And I hope for a fulfilled life. And unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, maybe this is a good thing for us, we can't selectively filter out emotions. Like if I went to someone and said, hey, I promise you, you are never going to feel disappointment, heartache, stress, worry, any of these feelings again. But the trade-off is you will also never feel love, pride, satisfaction, happiness in any of its forms and expressions. Is that a deal that you want to take? And most people go, no, I don't want to live an emotionally numb life.
Yeah.
And so that means we need to learn how to go, well, how do we actually manage all these and navigate them and sit with them? And one of the first things we can do is, as you were just talking about in the book, I talk a lot about getting emotionally curious and practicing emotional acceptance rather than emotional resistance or judgment. Now, there's so much research in positive psychology and wellbeing science about this, but I also find that it pops up in a lot of philosophy. In Buddhist philosophy and practice, there's this concept that a lot of suffering is actually caused by our resistance to reality, which is the reality is right now I may be experiencing, or in any moment, I may be experiencing a moment of anxiety, a moment of hopelessness, a moment of depression, a moment of fear or anger, and if I sit there and judge that, I think in the book I use the example of, stress is a very common feeling for a lot of people. I think Australia and New Zealand now are the second most stressed countries in the world for workplace stress, after the US and Canada. So it's not a silver medal, I'd say, that we should be proud of at the Olympics to go, hey, like we're second to the US and Canada and how stressed we are at work. So I'm going to go with stress, right? If you feel stressed and you go, I'm not meant to feel stressed, I'm meant to be a positive person, or I'm meant to keep it all together for the kids or for work, whatever it may be. Well, because we've judged that, now we're frustrated at ourselves for feeling stressed. And then we judge the frustration. Well, now it's going to snowball into I'm overwhelmed by how frustrated I am about this stress. And then if you keep letting it go, well, now I'm feeling actually quite anxious because these feelings aren't going away. And I'm anxious about the overwhelm, about the frustration, about the stress. But now we're dealing with this big snowball, this symphony of emotions. But if we just went, I feel quite stressed at the moment. Why is that? What might this be trying to tell me? And this is what acceptance is. Acceptance is not celebrating a feeling. It's not going, oh, I'm stoked to be stressed. I love it. It's just going, hey, the reality is I'm feeling a bit of stress lately. Why might that be? What might it be trying to tell me? And what does my mind and body need from me at the moment to help meet that feeling?
Mm.
And just being able to meet it with that curiosity. Now, the key there with the language is the more we build our emotional literacy and our emotional vocabulary, the more we can get nuanced in our feelings. We go, okay, well, my response to stress is going to be different than my response to frustration, for example. It's going to be different than my response to feeling flustered or rushed. And when we
Mm.
build out our emotional vocabulary, it just allows us to meet our emotions and understand them in a much cleaner way, rather than, a lot of the time if we check in and go, how are people feeling? It's, oh, not great. I'm like, okay, well, we've ruled out one feeling. We've ruled out great. We've got a lot left to narrow down. Or I'm not bad today is a common one in Australia. And I'm like, okay, so let's rule out bad. What about the rest, right? And so we just can't deal with it. It would be like trying to, play darts, but the whole board is blurry. You can't actually see what you're trying to hit, right? When if we actually bring in a bit of that clarity and go, this is the specific feeling, over time we get better at being able to meet them.
And that feelings wheel is brilliant. You can look at it in Declan's book. You can have a look at it online. It's brilliant. And in fact, reading your book and remembering that I had that cushion, which didn't quite achieve the objectives. I mean, we did spend time, but the kids were a bit young. I was a bit overambitious, I think, Declan. But now they're 16 and 18, so there is a little window of time there. I would consider that we're an emotionally literate family, but when you talked about being able to name 30 individual emotions as kind of like a bit of a benchmark for emotional literacy, I'm like, actually, I'm going to see if I can do that. I feel like I could probably do that. I'm not sure that either of my kids could. And so now I'm thinking about getting a poster and framing it. So we'll see. But yeah, thank you so much. I think I agree. And we do know the research, and you cited it in your book too, that when you can accurately being the important word to emphasize, notice and name how you are feeling. And we use exactly the same sentence. I was excited when I read that, because I'll say to myself, I'm feeling anxious right now, and that's okay. When you can just simply notice and name how you're feeling, whatever the feeling is palpable for me. And so I love that we've been able to talk about that. But I want to move on because there's so much goodness. And you talk about happiness as a set of skills. And for listeners who are really struggling right now, like my beautiful listeners, Declan, honestly, there's so many gorgeous people who listen to this podcast. And I know you have your podcast as well. And so you know that people are coming to podcasts like ours for so many different reasons. And for the person that's listening who's really feeling like, oh my gosh, this feels really out of reach, this idea of I'll be happy when is really entrenched in a lot of the way we think. And so we've sort of myth busted that idea that we don't have to wait. But for the person that's sort of feeling like, oh gosh, I don't know if this is accessible for me, where would you start in talking about maybe one happiness skill that gives a lot of bang for buck, so to speak, to help that person go, yeah, actually, I do feel that this is something that I can start to bring more of into sort of day to day?
If I was to choose one, and obviously the hard part here is I'm yet to find a pathway to the happiness skills. So, for example, at the college that I run, we teach 75 distinct skills that are correlated with happiness. There's a lot, right? It's like learning another language, I say. And I want to be mindful, you don't have to learn and master all 75 skills to live a happy life. Just like you don't have to learn every single word in another language to have a conversation in that language, right? But if you know a few words in Italian, you can probably have a good conversation when you go to Italy. It's the same with this. If you learn a bunch of these skills, the more you have, the more likely you are to be able to navigate life's challenges and create a happier, more thriving, more fulfilling life. When I was writing the book, I am sitting down going, okay, there's 75 skills that we've studied over the years that we know are correlated with happiness. We teach them at the college over 3 years. Let me compress this into a book. And I quickly realized it would end up looking like those Encyclopedia Britannica volumes that our grandparents all had on the shelves. It would take up a whole bookshelf.
Yeah.
And so I narrowed it down to 10, and then my publisher came back and said, 10's still going to be a really big book. What 5 would we start with? And that's what we dove into in the book. And I was kind of cheeky, to be honest, because even within those 5 skills, I kind of made them skill sets. Like chapter 1 that we we're just talking about, very much about, or skill 1 in the book, very much about emotional intelligence. But within that, there's the skills of emotional awareness, emotional literacy, emotional acceptance. Like I kind of bundled them up so I could
You
squeeze a
did
few more.
very cleverly.
Very cheekily. I was like, let's just fit them in. So if I was to tease apart and be like, here's one individual specific skill that's a great starting point for people that the research shows is remarkably beneficial for people's happiness. The first thing to do would be some form of introspection, which just basically means spending quality time with yourself, looking inwards at your thoughts and feelings.
Yeah.
And I write a lot about this in the book, that we live in a world where we think a lot of our answers come externally. And sometimes we're seeking those in podcasts, right? And so part of the challenge is I'm like, hey, this podcast should inspire you. It should get you to think in different ways. It should, add some tools and resources and understanding, but it doesn't have your silver bullet perfect strategy answer. And I don't think anyone does. So the first practice is spend quality time with yourself. Now in the book, I write about a few different ways to do that. 2 of my favorites are journaling and meditation, right? Any form of them. If you're someone who goes, okay, here we go. I rolled my eyes a little bit because I've tried meditation. I've heard it before. It doesn't work for me. You can be mindful and meditative in anything you're doing. It just means you're present where you are. You're curious about what's going on inside of you at that time. You're spending a quality time yourself. And I teach a bunch of ways to in the book. So whether it's some form of breathing, a guided meditation, a walking meditation, sound meditation, just some way that brings you back to the present and helps you look inwards rather than outwards. And then journaling is a way to get that out into something that you can analyze, like writing about your thoughts and feelings. Very, very useful. So that would be this first one, introspection. Spend quality time with yourself.
I just want to pause there for a second because I didn't obviously have any idea where you were going to go with the choice that you made to share. And I want to just say, when I was healing from depression, my psychotherapist, so he wasn't a psychologist, he was a psychotherapist. I didn't know the difference back then. It's not important right now, but he taught me TM meditation. And so I didn't have kids. I was really unwell and I was like, tell me what to do. I'll do it. And I did. And I did it twice a day for 20 minutes. And it was life-changing. Look, I'm just getting back into my meditation 18 years later because I've just been parenting and working and I haven't prioritized it. And I really know I need it more than ever. And so I just really want to reinforce that it doesn't have to be sitting, like you said, you can practice it in so many, but it's about that attention on what you're doing in that moment, patting your dog, doing the dishes, folding the washing, talking to someone, and that time to be introspective. It's stolen. Our attention is stolen from us so much. We can easily just feel like we just turn to our phones and turn outwards. So turning inwards, I really, really love that that's the first thing you've shared. And I'd like you to continue, but I just wanted to share that my experience of meditation, especially when I was at the lowest that you could ever be, that terrible depth of depression, it made the most profound difference to how I felt day to day.
And I think what's beautiful in that, thank you for sharing that story, is like, this is a lot of my philosophy of building a rigorous toolkit for happiness in life. Is sometimes we use certain tools for certain chapters and then they drift to the bottom of the toolkit and we haven't used them for a bit. And then here you are 18 years later going, I actually want to bring that tool back to the top of the toolkit. I want to dust the rust off a little bit, maybe use it again. I think that's beautiful, right? I don't think any approach to happiness needs to be done forever. It's what's the right tools that I have available to me for this chapter and for this time. And so if we build out this rigorous toolkit or this rigorous skill set of, as close to the 75 skills of happiness as we can, it allows us to go, what ones do I want to practice right now? I'm the same. I've got ones that have been much more relevant in previous chapters, aren't as relevant now. And then I'm sure they'll come back at some point. Maybe they won't. But the second thing I was going to recommend for you, which was actually the one that first came to mind, and I went, hard for people to do if they don't do introspection first, is develop some sort of gratitude and appreciation practice. Right? There's so much in the research and literature that says that this is so beneficial for retraining our brain, for helping us see the good. I would guarantee, even if you're going through a chapter of life where you go, hey, on the wellbeing spectrum, I'm in the crisis side of it. I'm in the very low end. And a lot of my life feels consumed by that. It feels very overwhelming. I can't really see around it. I would guarantee there are still little moments in some way, shape, or form that are nice. They're just being crowded out by how difficult life feels. Even in our darkest chapters, even in our darkest moments, if we can find, whether you want to call it, I've seen people call them glimmers rather than triggers. I've seen people call them silver linings on a storm cloud. Viktor Frankl, a great psychotherapist who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, wrote a lot about how even in our darkest moments of humanity, in our darkest moments of life, if we can find a sense of meaning, it helps alleviate suffering. And going, hey, this is hard right now, but there's still things that matter to me in life. Whatever that may be. My dog, my kids, right? Getting outside in nature. If you can go, hey, even if today felt horrible, what's a little moment that felt okay or a little bit better, just as a starting point? I find that when I practice gratitude, because I was the guy who for a long time read about gratitude in the literature and went, oh, this science says this is really good for us, but not for me. I've tried it. Doesn't work. Thought I was above the science. Turns out I'm not. What I was struggling with is I just really struggled when I'm in those lower ends of the wellbeing spectrum. If I'm in a zone of crisis, thankfully not happening too often these days. But actually, last year some challenge points. I became a dad in the last year, and there's definitely been some crisis and struggling moments with that transition. Even in those moments, what I'd find if I went, okay, time to write what I'm grateful for today. If I was looking at a blank page, my brain would go, nothing. Like nothing good happened today. Why are you doing this? Whereas if I had prompts, it helped me. And I think in the book I share my 3 prompts, which are, what is a small moment today I'm grateful for and why? So I'm trying to seek out little moments of good that I'd normally skip past. I mean, the tea that I just had this morning was brewed to the perfect temperature. And I just sat down. You know how sometimes you sip tea, it's a little too hot, or it's a little too cold. I feel like almost like Goldilocks for a second, right? With the 3 bears. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
it was just right. That was a nice little moment that I could easily skip past. But if I take notice of it, I get to enjoy it more. And then the second one is, who is someone I'm grateful for today, right? Who is a person I'm grateful for? Because happiness is inherently interrelated to others. And then the last one is often the hardest, which is why I leave it for last, because we get to warm up our gratitude muscle and build to it, which is, what is something about myself I'm grateful for today? Give myself a little bit of recognition and appreciation. And personally, for the people listening to this, you don't have to use them. You can use whatever prompts you want. But those are the 3 that I found work really well for me when practicing gratitude.
Thank you for sharing your gratitude practice. And I did highlight that when I was reading the book. Similarly, I used to have a gratitude practice. When I say similarly, when I first learned about the science of happiness, I started practicing so much of what I was learning, and I had an app, and I had an app, and every day religiously I would do my 3 things, and then it crashed, and I lost everything, and I lost sight of the fact that it didn't matter that the app crashed. The practice is not about collecting. It's about the thinking and the noticing and the appreciating. But I've matured since then. And it was just like, oh, it's all lost. And I let it go for a little while. But I've returned. And one of the things that I'd love for you to share, because I think it can help to understand the science and to sort of say, right, well, because people will probably go, you know what, I've heard about a gratitude practice. Convince me. Every day when I put my head on the pillow, this is my bedtime ritual. This is not private and personal, people, but this is just my bedtime ritual. I am filling in my activity track, my Whoop journal for the day. I've done my Duolingo. Often they're the things I'm doing. I shouldn't be on my phone at night, but I read one passage from the Daily Stoic, and then I read my book. And once I've finished my book, I put my head on the pillow and I start thinking about the things that I'm grateful for the day. And I typically fall asleep doing that. It is just the most beautiful ritual of an evening that helps me settle into sleep. And it's something that I would shout from the rooftops for people to bring gratitude back into their life if they've let go of it or if they haven't tried it. But the science behind it, why is gratitude so powerful when it comes to happiness?
Because it allows us to notice what's already there. Right, as the short answer, there is so much good in the world and in others and in yourself and in your life that our brain just doesn't normally take stock of or pay attention to, because, unfortunately, I've studied happiness now for over a decade, and unfortunately, one of the biggest things I've realized is our brain doesn't really care if we're happy. It cares that we're alive.
You're alive.
That's its priority, right? Which, to be honest, good priority. Glad our brain prioritizes survival. Stoked with that. Unfortunately, it just means that there's some trade-offs sometimes where it will sacrifice happiness for comfort or security or stability or predictability, because that's right. A good way to test this, and feel free to do this as you're listening to this, by the way. Don't do it if you're driving, because that would be unsafe. But if I told you to look around, wherever you're listening to this conversation right now, look around you and find as many red objects as you can. You look around, you'll take note of all of them. You'll sort of stock all the red. And if I said, close your eyes, again, don't do this when you're driving. This is why there's a close your eyes part. And with your eyes closed, try to recall the space around you and name as many green objects that are around you as possible. What happens is a lot of people struggle with that. They go, hey, you told me to look for red. I can't recall that much green. And they might name a couple of them. They'll get, 10 to 20% of the green objects around them. But if you go, hey, open your eyes and look at all the green around you. And they look around and go, whoa, there's actually way more than I remembered. And it's because what we did is we trained your brain. We said, hey, look for this. Now, if our brain is wired for survival, it's going, look for what's wrong, look for what the threat is, look for what's dangerous, look for where we can improve, right? So it's looking for red.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean the green isn't there. It just means that we didn't take conscious notice of it. This is called the reticular activating system, the part of the brain that filters out what's important to pay attention to or not. Another good way to test it, for anyone who's ever bought a new car, did you ever notice that after you bought it, you suddenly saw that car everywhere on the road? Right? And it's not that everyone in your suburb was like, let's play this giant collective prank against you and go, oh, well, they just bought themselves a new car. Let's go buy the same one. It's because you went and spent a ton of money on that car. Your brain went, this must be important because I've put a lot of resources into it. And it started noticing the things that were already there. Same thing. I did not realize how many babies were around until I became a dad. And I went, look at all these prams. Look at all these babies. Where did they come from? Is there a baby boom? No, birth rates are lower. Like, they were always there. Right? I just didn't notice them until it was important to me. This is what our brain's meant to do. So the beautiful part of a gratitude practice is, look, if I say practice it daily, I want to acknowledge we're all human beings. You're not going to do it daily. My benchmark for success is 80%. If 80% of the time you're doing a gratitude practice, be it writing it down, just taking conscious note of it, even just saying thank you to people more often, that is a gratitude practice. You are training your brain to go find the good in myself and in life and take conscious notice of it. And what's beautiful is after a few weeks of doing that, maybe a few months, you'll start doing it prospectively rather than just retrospectively.
Yeah.
So rather than just at the end of the day going, what good things happened today that I can write in my gratitude journal, you'll be going about your day and you'll be like, oh, that was a nice little moment. Oh, maybe I'll write about that in my gratitude journal tonight. And you start doing it almost with anticipation, which is a joy in itself. So that's that's a crash course in the summary behind it and why it's so valuable to train our brain to notice the good, because it is there.
It is. It absolutely is. And it's, forgive me if I've got this quote wrong, but it's happiness is wanting what you already have. Or have you come across that quote? Anyway, I'm butchering it, as my husband would say, but it's not getting what you want, it's wanting what you've got. And yes, that's probably more along the lines of it. But when we look on our socials and we look around and society and marketing tells us all the things we should have to be happy. And I remember I used to run the happiness retreat at the Peninsula Hot Springs. Are you in New South Wales?
I am.
You are, yeah. So I used to talk a lot about the science of happiness, more so now about wellbeing and anxiety, of course. But I remember somebody in the audience was saying that for her it was cushions. It was decorating her house in cushions. And she said, my goodness, if I'd heard you speak years before the thousands of dollars I would have saved. Because society and all around us, we're getting all these messages of this is what you need. And once you've got this, and I even had a little moment recently because my milk frother broke and I love my coffee machine, but I don't like using the wand for the milk, Declan. I really like just to press a button on a milk frother. And I saw this Smeg milk frother, but they're $300. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I want that so badly. That'll be everything. Like I could feel my body and my brain. I'm like, Jodi, come on. And I found one on Marketplace that was pretty much like new and less than a third of the cost. And we needed to replace our milk frother anyway. So I was delighted. But it's very easy for us to fall into that trap, isn't it? And so this gratitude practice helps us recognize most people listening, I hope, have everything that they need. Safety, roof over their heads, food on the table. Some might be struggling, and I hope that you're connecting with the support and help that you need. But at the end of the day, the things that we think are going to contribute to happiness really are, as we said at the beginning, are leading us down really a pathway that just leads to wanting more and moving the goalposts. And as we come to the end of this conversation, because I really want to let people know how they can connect with you and learn more about the book. But is there anything I haven't asked you that you would like for people to know and understand about happiness? It doesn't have to be big, but just maybe an insight or a question I haven't asked that you think, oh, this is something I really would like for people to understand as they kind of, digest all that we've talked about today.
Could I share with the audience something I've changed my mind on about happiness in the last couple of years?
Yes, please.
Early in my career of studying and teaching and practicing happiness as a skill set and as a science, thought that happiness was inherently an inside job, right? And there was almost this correction from this sense of, we're told this idea that happiness is an external thing, that you can buy it or achieve it, all the stuff we've spoken about throughout this conversation. I went, no, happiness comes from within. We need to work on that. Which I think is true to a degree, but what I've changed my mind on in recent years is happiness may start within, but it's cultivated and strengthened and nurtured collectively and in community. And I think that's something that a lot of even look at the term self-help, right? Self-help as an industry is very focused on self. Those 75 happiness skills that we teach at BU Happiness College, I've broken them into 3 buckets. And the third bucket's our newest one because of this change of mind that I've had. The first bucket was, hey, here's a collection of skills to help with personal happiness. We call them personal happiness skills. How do we help people manage their mind and emotions more effectively, right? The second bucket is then personal growth skills. How do we help people feel like they're growing and progressing in life and fulfilling their potential? So that'll be things like knowing their strengths, setting their vision, goal setting, habit building, all that stuff.
Yeah.
We used to stop there. That was the curriculum. That was it. And in the last couple of years, I've added in this third bucket, which I call interpersonal happiness skills, which is these are the skills that we need to get good at to play our role in supporting the happiness of those around us. And so much of the research coming out now is that happiness is inherently interdependent on each other. Like if you want a simple life, sure, go be a hermit in the woods with no people around, because having people in your life inherently adds complexity, right? It adds a bit of chaos.
And detracts from happiness at times.
Right? It adds these challenges, but geez, it adds a lot of beauty too. And I do worry that some of those interpersonal happiness skills, things like curiosity, empathy, being able to support people in healthy ways, compassion, right? Being able to good, effective communication, boundary setting, these things that help us have good relationships and feel good in our relationships and in our communities and support the happiness of those around us, not at the detraction of our own happiness, but in a way that's self-sustaining. I worry that we're losing them, or maybe not losing them, but not practicing them enough as a society.
Yes.
And so I'd share with listeners, like, yes, of course, please take what you've learned from this conversation and practice it for yourself to support your own happiness and well-being. I think that's a beautiful thing to do, but don't let it just end there. Please play your part in spreading a ripple effect of happiness and sharing it with other people, having conversations about it, trying to show up in a way that you're like, hey, this isn't just about me being a happier version of myself and living a happier life. It's also about me being a more intentional parent and partner and friend and community member. And I just believe if more and more people did that, we would create a much happier world as a whole.
Thank you so much. And you've reminded me of just a tiny little moment on my drive here to the studio this morning. I was a bit disappointed because I got my daughter to order me a takeaway coffee, which I indulge in occasionally these days now that I've got my coffee machine. She didn't do my order properly, so I picked up my coffee, and that was like, anyway, I was a little disappointed with my coffee. But I thought, you know what? I've got a warm cuppa. I've got a nice drive. I'm all good. And then I pulled to turn onto Nepean Highway, and there was a big van I was turning left, and they were going to cross over the double lanes to sort of turn right onto the next, As I'm kind of creeping around to the left, I couldn't see the oncoming traffic because this big sort of van was in my way. And we made eye contact. I made eye contact with the driver, and I sort of gave him the it's okay, there's no rush kind of hand signal, because I just didn't want him to feel pressured that he was holding me up in any way. And he gave me the okay symbol back. And then he was watching the traffic, and then he looks at me and he points as if to say, you're safe to go. Now, of course, I'm teaching my son to drive, and I'm like, you never trust that. Like, yes, it can be an indication, but you've always got to check. And so as I started to inch out, he actually pulled out. So basically his whole van was, was protecting my car, if that makes sense, because he was free to go and I was free to go. And just that tiny little human moment of interaction with this stranger who we were both looking out for each other, I noticed this little dopamine hit and I felt happy in that moment. And what you've just shared, those moments are around for us, that if we're alert to them, if we're open, if we're just able to interact in the world in a way that is a little kinder, a little more supportive, then it can come back to us in it's not about ourselves, but it does come back to us. And so anyway, you just reminded me of that, Declan, but we could talk forever about this. And I just want to thank you. Thank you for your work. That the world needs more of you and this work, and this conversation I know is just a brilliant, brilliant resource now for everybody listening to maybe start thinking about it differently and doing things that are going to genuinely bring more happiness. Where can people find the book, How to Be Happy, and learn more about you and all the wonderful work that you're doing?
Yeah, so a couple of ways, obviously on all the social platforms. If you head to BU Happiness College, which is just the letters BU, and at Happiness College, you'll find all our resources and tools on there as well. If you're a podcast person, I assume you are because you're listening to a podcast.
Yes.
I have a podcast called How to Be Happy, where I share the skills and science of happiness. And of course, the book, How to Be Happy, in all good bookstores, Amazon, Booktopia, in your local bookstore as of 1st of July in Australia. So if you're listening, and overseas as of 1st of August 2026. So as long as you're listening after those dates, it's already out there in the world. Please go and grab a copy.
Oh, congratulations. It's a huge accomplishment to have a book coming out to the world. Declan, thank you so much for your time. I've loved talking with you. I really appreciate all that you've shared. I know our listeners will too, and all the best with your continued wonderful work.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Thank you for sharing this time with me on Well, Hello Anxiety. Remember, understanding anxiety is the first step to managing it. Until next time, be gentle with yourself. Take things one moment at a time. Focus on what you can control and know that you are not alone on this journey. If you found value in today's episode, please share it with someone who might need to hear it too. I'm Dr. Jodi Richardson, and I'll meet you right back here next week. Your child or teen's anxiety doesn't come with a guidebook, but this comes close. I created the Anxiety Toolkit for Parents, a 70-card deck to support parents of anxious children and teens. These cards help you understand what's at the heart of anxiety, how it shows up for your child, explore calming strategies that work, and learn what truly helps and why. You can think of these cards as my help in the palm of your hand. Find your deck at drjodirichardson.com.